The city was alive with noise. Cars honking, footsteps rushing, and vendors calling out their prices. But for one young girl, the rhythm of life sounded very different. 11-year-old Amara sat on the edge of a cold stone step outside the busy train station, her tiny frame wrapped in a faded hoodie far too large for her body. Her shoes were scuffed, her jeans torn at the knees, and her small backpack, her only possession, looked like it had been through years of storms. Inside it, she carried nothing but a notebook filled with scribbles of music notes and an old sandwich wrapper. Hunger clawed at her stomach like a wild animal, and her lips trembled as the cold wind cut across her face. Amara was a black child, invisible to the city rushing around her. People walked past without glancing down, their eyes fixed on their phones, their bags, or their destinations. Some wrinkled their noses when they did notice her, assuming she was just another lost cause. They didn't know that inside this hungry girl lived something extraordinary, something that could silence even the cruelest laughter. Her mother had once told her, "Baby, you were born with music in your soul. Don't ever let the world take that away." But her mother was gone now, lost to sickness and poverty, leaving Amara to survive on the edge of society. The world had stolen her safety, her home, and her comfort, but it had not yet stolen her music. Every day, she drifted between the train station, the public park, and a small cafe that threw out leftover bread. But today her hunger was sharper than usual, and the bread had already been claimed by others before she arrived. Her stomach growled so loudly that she pressed her hands against it, embarrassed, as people looked at her with a mix of pity and annoyance. She wanted food, yes, but more than that she wanted dignity, to be seen not as a nuisance but as a human being. She wandered further into the city until she found herself outside a hotel lobby, where a gleaming black grand piano stood near the glass doors. She pressed her face to the window, her breath fogging the glass. The piano looked like magic to her eyes, its polished surface reflecting the golden chandelier lights. For Amara, pianos were not just instruments. They were voices, companions, and lifelines. She had learned to play years ago when her mother worked as a cleaner in a small community center. While her mother mopped floors, Amara would sneak into the corner room where an old, upright piano sat unused. With no teacher, no books, and no instructions, she had listened, touched, and learnt. Each key was like a friend, each note like a secret whisper of hope. Now, standing outside the hotel, Amara felt an ache that was more than hunger. She wanted to play. She wanted to remind herself that even though the world treated her like a shadow, she still had something worth giving. She pushed the door open timidly, her small figure almost invisible among the well-dressed guests who bustled inside. At first, nobody noticed her, but as she walked closer to the piano, a man in a uniform, perhaps a hotel guard, stepped in front of her. "Hey kid, you can't be here," he said, his voice sharp and dismissive. His eyes scanned her torn clothes and her dirty shoes, and he didn't hide his disdain. Amara's voice shook as she whispered, "Please, can I play? Just for a little bit." The guard laughed, shaking his head. "Play? You? This isn't some street corner, little girl. Go beg somewhere else." His laughter drew the attention of two women nearby, dressed in expensive coats, sipping lattes. They glanced at Amara, then at each other, and laughed too. "Play for food, huh?" One of them mocked. "Maybe she thinks she's some kind of prodigy." Their words stung more than the cold air ever could. Amara lowered her head, but she didn't step away. Hunger gave her courage, and dignity gave her strength. She lifted her chin slightly and said again, louder this time, "Please, just one song. If you don't like it, I'll leave." The women rolled their eyes, clearly amused, and one muttered, "Fine, let the little beggar embarrass herself." The guard hesitated, then shrugged. "Go on, but make it quick." Amara's hands trembled as she reached out to the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, hesitant at first, like a bird unsure if it could still fly. She closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and pressed down. The sound was pure, clear, beautiful, like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. Her small fingers began to move faster, no longer trembling but flowing. She played with passion that seemed far beyond her years. The lobby, once filled with chatter and clinking glasses, slowly quieted. People turned, heads lifted from phones. Conversations paused. Her music filled the air, weaving sorrow and hope into every note. It was not the hesitant playing of a child, but the soul-stirring voice of someone who had lived through pain and found beauty on the other side. The two women who had laughed earlier stared, their mocking smiles fading into stunned silence. The guard, who had been ready to throw her out, froze, his eyes wide. Guests coming in from the street stopped in their tracks. Even the concierge behind the desk leaned forward, his mouth slightly open. Amara played not just with skill, but with truth. Each note carried her hunger, her loneliness, her grief, and her unbroken spirit. It was a cry and a celebration all at once. She didn't need words to say she was human. The music said it all. When she finally finished, her hands fell still on the keys, and the silence that followed was heavier than applause. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly clapping began. First from one man near the bar, then from a group of guests, then from almost the entire lobby. The sound of applause echoed off the marble floors and glass walls, surrounding Amara, in something she hadn't felt in so long: acknowledgement. Her cheeks burnt, not from shame but from something like pride. For a fleeting second, she wasn't a homeless girl in torn clothes. She was a musician, a prodigy, a soul with a voice. But not everyone clapped. In the corner, a man muttered, "Probably just some scam. She'll play a song, get some pity money, and disappear." His words were sharp, dismissing her gift as a trick, and others nodded in agreement. The hotel guard approached her again, his tone less harsh but still firm. "That's enough, kid. You had your fun." Amara looked at him, her stomach aching, and said softly, "I didn't want fun. I just wanted food." Her voice cracked, and the raw honesty in her words hit harder than her music had. For a moment, silence fell again. People exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some looked away, unwilling to face the truth in her plea. The two women who had laughed earlier now avoided her gaze, suddenly ashamed. But others stepped forward, a man placing a sandwich in front of her, another woman slipping a few bills into her small hand. Amara's eyes widened, and for the first time in days, she smiled through tears. Yet even in that moment, judgment lingered in the air. Some clapped only because it was fashionable to do so. Some gave food or money not out of compassion, but out of guilt. And others still whispered cruel words, refusing to see her humanity. Amara didn't care. She had played. She had been heard. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't invisible. But she didn't know that this small moment, the laughter, the piano, the hunger, was just the beginning of a story that would shake the city, challenge its prejudices, and reveal the undeniable truth. She wasn't just a homeless girl. She was a piano prodigy. The applause faded, but the memory of the sound lingered in Amara's chest like a flame that refused to die. She sat still on the piano bench, her small hands folded in her lap, unsure whether she should leave or wait for someone to tell her what to do. Hunger gnawed at her insides, but for once wasn't the loudest thing she felt. For once, the world had seen her. But the world outside the lobby was much bigger than she realized. As Amara stood to leave, clutching the sandwich someone had given her and the few bills folded tightly in her fist, she noticed a young woman standing near the corner, holding up her phone. The red recording light blinked. The woman lowered her phone and smiled gently at Amara. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "Don't be afraid. The world needs to hear you." Amara didn't quite understand, but she nodded shyly before slipping out of the lobby, unnoticed once again by most of the well-dressed guests returning to their conversations. She didn't know that in the next few hours, her face, her music, and her trembling voice asking for food would spread across phones and screens far beyond the hotel walls. The young woman uploaded the video with the caption, "This homeless girl just silenced a hotel lobby. She's not begging, she's a prodigy." The video spread quickly, first through local social media groups, then across national platforms. People who had never set foot in that hotel lobby now watched Amara's small, fragile figure command the grand piano like it belonged to her. They saw the disdain on the guard's face, the mocking laughter of the women, the way her music silenced the room, and her heartbreaking whisper, "I just wanted food." By evening, the video had hundreds of thousands of views. By midnight, it had millions. Comments poured in. Back-end index pointing right. How can such talent be living on the streets? This is heartbreaking. Back-end index pointing right. Her music brought me to tears. Someone needs to help this child. Back-end index pointing right. Shame on those who laughed at her. She deserves so much better. Back-end index pointing right. Get this girl a piano, a teacher, and a stage. But not all comments were kind. Some accused her of being part of a scam. This is staged, they wrote. Homeless people don't play Chopin out of nowhere. Others questioned if she was really homeless at all, saying she must have been planted there for views. The internet is always divided. Yet in the middle of disbelief and mockery, her music rose louder than the doubts. Meanwhile, Amara sat on the cold steps of the train station again, unaware of the storm she had ignited online. She nibbled at the sandwich, saving half for later, and hummed softly to herself. She didn't know the city was whispering her name. By morning, news crews had picked up the story. Homeless piano prodigy stuns hotel guests, read the headlines. Local reporters fanned out into the streets, searching for her. At the same time, strangers wandered the train station and nearby parks, hoping to catch a glimpse of the girl whose music had touched their hearts. It didn't take long for someone to spot her. A man in a business suit, carrying coffee, froze when he saw her sitting against the wall with her backpack. "It's her," he whispered, pulling out his phone. Within minutes, a crowd formed, cameras flashing, voices buzzing. Amara panicked. She clutched her backpack tightly and tried to shrink into herself. "Please," she murmured, "please stop." But the more she begged, the more people leaned in, desperate for a closer look. Some wanted selfies. Others shoved microphones in her face. "Play something for us," one man shouted. "What's your name?" Another woman demanded. "Are you really homeless? Or is this just an act?" Her chest tightened. This wasn't music. This wasn't dignity. This was chaos. Suddenly, a calm but firm voice cut through the noise. "Back up. Give her space." The crowd turned. A woman in her late 30s stepped forward, her curly hair pulled into a bun, a satchel slung across her shoulder. She was a music teacher named Evelyn Carter, and she had seen the video the night before. But unlike the others, she hadn't come to consume Amara's pain or talent like entertainment. She had come to protect it. Kneeling down beside Amara, Evelyn spoke softly. "Sweetheart, my name is Evelyn. I teach music. You don't have to do anything right now. Do you want to come with me? Just for a meal. Just to rest." Amara's wide eyes searched Evelyn's face. For the first time, she saw no judgment, no hunger for spectacle, just kindness. She nodded slowly. The crowd grumbled as Evelyn guided Amara away, shielding her from the cameras. They slipped into a small diner a few blocks away. The smell of eggs, toast, and coffee filled the air. Amara's stomach growled so loudly that Evelyn chuckled gently and handed her menu. "Order anything you like," she said. Amara hesitated, scanning the prices, guilt tugging at her heart. But Evelyn encouraged her, and soon a plate of pancakes, scrambled eggs, and orange juice sat in front of her. She ate quickly at first, then slowed down, savoring each bite. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Thank you." Evelyn reached across the table and touched her hand lightly. "Don't thank me, Amara. Just eat. And when you're ready, I want to hear your story." Between bites, Amara told her everything. About her mother's illness, her nights in shelters, her stolen meals, and her longing for music. She described sneaking into the community center piano room, teaching herself by ear, and how the hotel lobby was the first time in months she'd touched real keys. Evelyn listened, her heart heavy with both sorrow and admiration. She knew raw talent when she saw it, but this was more than talent. This was brilliance born from survival, music carved out of pain and hope. When Amara finished eating, Evelyn leaned forward. "Amara, the world is talking about you right now. People saw what you did. They felt it, And I promise you, this is just the beginning. But you need protection. You need someone to stand with you, not to use you. Amara's eyes widened. The world is talking about me? Evelyn pulled out her phone and showed her the video. Amara watched herself on the screen, her small fingers dancing across the keys, her face lit with music. The comments scrolled endlessly. She gasped, "That's me. That's really me?" Evelyn smiled. "Yes, that's you. And you're about to change everything." But with recognition came risk. As they sat in the diner, Evelyn's phone buzzed nonstop with calls and messages from reporters, agencies, and even strangers offering money. Some wanted to sponsor Amara. Others wanted to exploit her. Evelyn knew the difference. She looked at Amara seriously. "Sweetheart, you have a gift. But you're also a child. If we're not careful, people will try to take advantage of you. We need to be smart. We need to protect your story before they twist it." Amara clutched her backpack, fear flickering in her eyes. "I don't want to be laughed at again." "You won't," Evelyn promised. "Not while I'm here." Over the next few days, Evelyn took Amara into her small apartment, giving her a warm bed and real meals. She introduced her to a piano in her music school, where Amara's fingers flew across the keys like they had been waiting their whole lives for this moment. The students and teachers who watched her play were stunned. Still, the noise outside grew louder. News anchors debated her story. Is she really a prodigy? Or is this a feel-good exaggeration? Some asked. Social media is split between those calling her an angel and those calling her a fraud. And through it all, Amara just wanted one thing: food, dignity, and the chance to play. But destiny had bigger plans. Because in just a few short weeks, the little homeless girl who once begged to play for food would be standing under stage lights she could never have imagined, her music echoing not just through lobbies and diners, but through the hearts of millions. And the laughter that once tried to break her would become applause that lifted her higher than she had ever dreamed. The first time Amara saw her own face on television, she didn't recognize herself. The screen showed a fragile little girl with tired eyes, sitting at a grand piano in a hotel lobby. The announcer's voice boomed. The homeless piano prodigy who shocked the world, Amara James. She blinked at the screen in Evelyn's apartment, clutching the blanket tightly around her shoulders. It felt surreal, as though they were talking about someone else. But Evelyn placed a gentle hand on her back and whispered, "That's you, sweetheart. The world sees you now." The recognition was overwhelming. Reporters knocked at Evelyn's door, neighbors whispered outside, and mailboxes overflowed with letters from strangers, some offering help, some demanding proof, and some carrying cruel words that Amara couldn't bear to read. For every kind soul cheering her on, there was someone trying to drag her back down. But amidst the noise came one invitation that changed everything. A prestigious music foundation reached out, offering Amara the chance to perform at their annual gala. The event would host world-renowned musicians, influential leaders, and philanthropists. It was a stage far beyond the hotel lobby, far beyond the train station steps. It was a place where legends were made. Evelyn sat Amara down one evening and explained gently, "This could open doors for you, Amara. Not just for food, not just for shelter, but for your future. Are you ready for that kind of attention?" Amara hesitated, fear and hope wrestling inside her. "They laughed at me before," she whispered. "What if they laugh again?" Evelyn's eyes softened. "Then let them laugh. And then you'll play and silence them once more. Because your music doesn't ask for permission, it demands respect." With Evelyn's guidance, Amara practiced day and night. She played not only Chopin and Beethoven, but also melodies she had created herself. Haunting, soulful pieces that carried the weight of her struggle and the brilliance of her spirit. Evelyn often sat quietly, tears in her eyes, as Amara's fingers told stories no words could capture. The night of the gala arrived. The venue shimmered with chandeliers, velvet curtains, and the scent of roses. Amara wore a simple dress that Evelyn had carefully chosen, nothing extravagant, but it made her look radiant. As she stepped onto the stage, whispers rippled through the audience. Some knew her story, others eyed her with skepticism. "She's the homeless girl from the internet," someone muttered. "Let's see if she can actually play," another scoffed. Amara stood at the grand piano, her knees trembling. The lights blinded her. The audience loomed like an ocean of judgment. For a moment, she thought she couldn't do it. Then she remembered the hunger, the cold nights, and the laughter that tried to break her. She remembered Evelyn's words. Your music demands respect. Her fingers touched the keys. The first note rang out, clear, steady, defiant. She began with a Chopin nocturne, her hands gliding with precision, each note a quiet declaration that she belonged here. The room fell silent. Then, seamlessly, she transitioned into her own composition, a piece she called Hunger's Song. The melody rose like a cry from the streets, a mix of sorrow and resilience, despair and hope. The audience leaned forward, captured by the story she told without words. By the final chord, not a single sound disturbed the air. And then, the applause erupted. It was not polite clapping. It was thunder. People rose to their feet, some wiping tears from their eyes, others cheering her name. Amara sat frozen, overwhelmed, before standing slowly and bowing. For the first time, she felt not mocked, not pitted, but honored. But with honor came a new weight. Within days, talent agencies flooded Evelyn's phone with calls. Some promised wealth, others fame. They dangled contracts filled with fine print, offering record deals, endorsements, and tours. Yet Evelyn knew the dangers. She had seen prodigies consumed by the industry, chewed up and discarded. Amara herself felt torn. The thought of money meant her mother could have medicine, food, and a home. But the thought of strangers owning her music and controlling her voice filled her with dread. It didn't take long before the uglier side of fame appeared. Online, debates raged. Some praised her brilliance, but others attacked her identity. She's just a homeless black girl. She'll never make it in the classical world, one comment read. Another sneered, she doesn't belong in those halls. She should stick to begging. These words cut deeper than hunger ever had. One night, scrolling through hateful comments, Amara broke down. Why do they hate me, Evelyn? I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted food. I just wanted to play. Evelyn pulled her into a hug. They don't hate you, Amara. They hate what you represent. Proof that greatness can come from the places they look down upon. They want to protect their walls, their privileges. But your music breaks through those walls. That's why they fear you. Still, the attacks grew louder. Tabloids twisted her story, some accusing Evelyn of exploiting her, others claiming Amara was exaggerating her struggles for fame. Paparazzi followed them in the streets. Strangers shouted at them, some kind, some cruel. Through it all, Amara kept playing. Music became her shield, her weapon, her voice. Yet behind her melodies lingered a deep ache, an unanswered question. Could she rise without being broken by the very world that applauded her? Then came another test. A luxury brand invited Amara to perform at a private event. The paycheck was enormous, enough to pay for her mother's treatment and secure housing. But when Evelyn read the details, her stomach turned. The event wasn't about music. It was about spectacle. They wanted Amara as a novelty, a homeless girl turned prodigy, to entertain wealthy guests, not as an artist, but as an exotic story. When Evelyn explained, Amara's face fell. So, they don't want me, they just want my pain? Evelyn nodded sadly. Yes, and you must choose, money now or dignity forever. Amara sat silently, her small hands curled into fists. She thought of her mother, of the cold streets, of the endless hunger. But then she thought of the music, the one thing that had always been hers, untouched by cruelty. She lifted her chin and whispered, I won't be their showpiece. I'm not for sale. It was a costly decision. The brand pulled their offer. Critics mocked her as ungrateful. Even some fans turned, saying she had thrown away her chance. But Amara stood firm. She would not trade her soul for comfort. And then, just when the storm seemed darkest, a letter arrived. It was handwritten, on fine paper, with elegant ink. It came from a world-renowned conductor who had seen her viral video and the gala performance. He invited her to join his orchestra as a guest soloist for an international concert. Not as a spectacle, not as charity, but as an equal. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes as she read it aloud. He sees you, Amara, not as a homeless girl, not as a story, but as a musician. Amara pressed the letter to her chest, her heart racing. For the first time, she glimpsed not just survival, not just recognition, but true belonging. Yet she knew this stage would be the greatest test of all, because stepping into the world of international music meant stepping into arenas where her identity would be challenged harder than ever. Could a black girl from the streets hold her own among the elites of classical music? Could her notes carry not just her story, but the story of everyone who had been silenced, mocked, or cast aside? She didn't know, but she was ready to try. And as she placed her fingers on the piano once more, practicing for the concert of a lifetime, her music rose stronger than ever. Not just a cry for food, not just a plea for recognition, but a battle song for justice, dignity, and the right to exist unapologetically. The world had laughed once. Now, the world would listen. The plane ride was the longest journey Amara had ever taken. She pressed her forehead against the small window, staring at the clouds outside. For a girl who once measured distance by how far her feet could carry her before hunger forced her to stop, soaring above the world felt unreal. Evelyn sat beside her, holding her hand, sensing the weight of what lay ahead. The invitation had come from Maestro Gabriel Duval, one of the most respected conductors in the world. His orchestra was preparing for a global broadcast concert to be held in Vienna, the heart of classical music. It was a city that had celebrated geniuses for centuries, and one that had rarely, if ever, welcomed a child like Amara. When they landed, the grandeur of the city overwhelmed her. Cobblestone streets, towering cathedrals, and golden-lit concert halls. The air smelt of roasted chestnuts and rain. But not everyone greeted her with open arms. At the rehearsal hall, whispers followed her as she entered. Musicians, older, polished, trained in prestigious academies, looked her up and down. Some smiled politely. Others exchanged skeptical glances. "That's the girl from the internet," one violinist muttered. "She's never even been to a conservatory," another said. "This is a publicity stunt." Amara heard every word, each whisper cut like a blade. But she kept her gaze low and her steps steady. Evelyn whispered encouragement beside her. "You don't need their permission. You have your music." Maestro Duval silenced the room with a wave of his hand. His tall frame and silver hair commanded respect. But his eyes softened when he looked at Amara. "Welcome, my dear. Seat. Let us play." The piano gleamed under the stage lights. Amara sat, her hands trembling slightly as she touched the keys. For a moment, doubt tried to take root. What if I fail? What if they're right? But then she remembered the train station's cold steps, the hotel lobby's cruel laughter, and the gala's thunderous applause. She remembered hunger. She remembered survival. She began to play. At first, the notes were cautious like footsteps on thin ice. But then her confidence surged and the room shifted. The musicians leaned in, their skepticism melting into awe as her music filled the hall. She played not just the piece written on the page, but her story, each note layered with pain, perseverance, and pride. When she finished, silence hung heavy. Then, slowly, the musicians began to clap, one by one, until the sound echoed through the hall. Even the harshest skeptics lowered their heads, humbled. Maestro Duval's eyes glistened. "Yes," he whispered, "this is music." The night of the concert arrived. The Vienna concert hall was packed with thousands of guests, while millions more waited to watch the broadcast. Cameras glided across the audience, capturing royalty, celebrities, and leaders. Behind the stage curtain, Amara stood in her modest dress, clutching a small bracelet that had belonged to her mother. She whispered a silent prayer. "This is for you, Mama. This is for all of us who were told we were nothing." When her name was announced, the audience erupted in polite applause, curiosity more than admiration. A child prodigy from the streets was a novelty, and many expected little more than a charming distraction before the real performances began. She walked to the piano, her head held high. The lights dimmed. The conductor raised his baton. And then, silence. Amara closed her eyes, letting the memory of hunger and cold wash through her one last time. Then she pressed the first key. The music that followed was unlike anything the hall had ever heard. It began with a gentle sadness, echoing the nights she had gone to sleep with an empty stomach. Then it swelled into chaos, the noise of the streets, the mockery, the cruelty of a world that had turned its back on her. But from that storm rose something powerful, resilience, fire, hope. Her fingers flew across the keys, commanding the instrument with a mastery beyond her years. She was not just playing, she was fighting, speaking, proclaiming, "I exist. I matter. I will not be silenced." The orchestra rose to meet her, weaving their sound into hers until the hall vibrated with something bigger than music. It was truth. The final notes thundered like a heartbeat, then faded into stillness. For a moment there was nothing, no applause, no whispers, just silence, as though the world itself was catching its breath. And then the hall erupted. Thunderous applause shook the walls. People rose to their feet, shouting her name. Tears streamed down faces that had once looked at her with doubt. The ovation lasted minutes, stretching into eternity. Amara stood, her small frame bathed in golden light, bowing deeply. This time, there was no laughter. This time, there was no pity. This time, there was only respect. In the days that followed, headlines across the world celebrated her, from hunger to harmony. The prodigy who redefined music. Scholarships poured in. Conservatories begged to train her. Leaders invited her to speak about poverty and resilience. But Amara remained grounded. She returned home, not as a star chasing wealth, but as a girl carrying a message. She visited shelters, played for children who reminded her of herself, and told them, "Don't let the world laugh you into silence. Your story matters. Your voice matters." Her mother, frail but alive, sat in the front row the day Amara gave her first full concert in her hometown. When the music ended, she rose weakly to her feet, clapping with trembling hands, whispering, "That's my daughter." And in that moment, Amara understood, it wasn't just about music. It was about dignity, about turning pain into power, about refusing to be defined by hunger or homelessness or the cruelty of strangers. She had once asked for food in exchange for a song. Now, she gave her songs freely, and they fed souls across the world. The girl they had laughed at had become the woman they would never forget.